As a kid, I was never able to beat Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, or so I thought at least, because this game is a pretty fucking easy strip back concept of the X-Men Legends and Ultimate Alliance series, though I will note, for some unknown reason, I decided to purchase this game on the Nintendo Wii back in the day. So perhaps my child arms couldn't waggle hard enough, or perhaps I was just a fucking dumbass and didn't know how to play. It's hard to say, honestly, but this time Aiden and I beat this game with ease, while playing this game on the Xbox 360 port as grown-up upper 20s-something adults. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 was released in September 2009, with development on the game switching from Ravensoft, the series creators, to Vicarious Visions, and with it came a slightly overhauled gameplay style with the concept of the game to follow the general idea of Marvel's Civil War event, a then pretty recent and popular publisher-wide event that featured two factions of Marvel characters, one led by Captain America and one led by Iron Man, in a bloody war over ideologies. Activision announced the game in 2008 with the original subtitle Marvel Ultimate Alliance Fusion before they dropped the Fusion. Not sure if it meant some gameplay mechanic was dropped, but it sounds like from its announcement it was to be based around the Civil War comic, so I don't really know what the Fusion was all about initially. There were portable and last-gen ports of the game as well, with N-Space on the ports for these games, with assistance from Savage Entertainment for the PSP port, and compressing the PS2 port. As I said, the game plot loosely follows Civil War, though that is a relatively short portion of the game, with the game addressing the fallout of the battle with Doctor Doom from the last game, and going on to show how Nitro killed numerous citizens after a botched fight with the New Warriors. This divides the Marvel Universe, with S.H.I.E.L.D. attempting to start a superhero registration program that would see them basically being held accountable by the government and work by deployment in the vein of a military branch. Tony Stark is pro-registration and gathers an army to back him, while Captain America is anti-registration and creates his own army. The pro-registration heroes eventually use nanite technology to mind control supervillains, and this is when the story briefly converges, allowing you to pick a pro or anti-registration path, though eventually it remerges. Anyway, though, as you're forced to fight these nanite-controlled villains. By the end of the game, you get one of two endings. For pro-registration, Iron Man takes over S.H.I.E.L.D., allowing but not requiring heroes to register, and the anti-ending sees the act repealed altogether. Basically, the game's story is an awkward half-attempt at adapting Civil War, as people like the comic's concept, so it was tempting to make an adaptation of it. This game sees a few new characters mixed in with returning fighters. Black Panther returns from the first game and is a physical attacker. He seems okay, but was never on our main squad, in part because the healing factor ability was overpowered, so we mostly had heroes with that ability and skipped Black Panther. Captain America returns. He was pretty good. We didn't maintain him in our main squad as we had in the first game, though. Ultimately, we took Iron Man's path since we had him in our main squad, and Captain America was one we were locked out of for the bulk of the middle of the game. Cable is playable in the DLC, which we didn't buy in time to have for our playthrough, since this game was delisted along with all its DLC, but he returns from being a PC exclusive character in X-Men Legends 2 if you have the complete edition. Carnage is new to this game. He is DLC exclusive, so we never got to play him either. This version is based around the original version from the comics, Cletus Cassidy, who first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 360 from 1992. He's basically Venom, but even more evil. Daredevil reappears here and is again a fast physical character, and again though, we didn't really connect well with his gameplay style and didn't main him. He's just a bit too jumpy for us in both games. Deadpool is always a surprisingly strong character in these games, so we actually used him for much of the game. However, we eventually dropped him. He is, as you may imagine, a physical character with some gun moves, a mix that makes him fairly versatile, able to do a lot of stuff, but great at none of it. Gambit is playable here for the first time since X-Men Legends 2. He was an okay mixed character like Deadpool, but we never really used him in this game, with Deadpool seeming a bit more viable when we got him early in the game. Green Goblin is playable in this game for the first time, being a sort of odd character, with a playstyle somewhat reminiscent of Iron Man, I guess, flying with projectiles. We never played him any substantial amount of time though. He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 14 and would eventually become Spider-Man's main villain after developing the character and having some iconic moments like when he killed Spider-Man's former comic book girlfriend Gwen Stacy. Hobgoblin is an alt to him, the Roderick Kingsley version. In this game, alts don't really do anything but change the look of a character, so it's not super important or fun like it was in the previous game, but if you want a LARP Hobgoblin, knock yourself out. Roderick Kingsley first appeared in Spectacular Spider-Man 43 before being the mysterious Hobgoblin, kind of Green Goblin's villain cousin. The mantle was always passed around much like Green Goblin, and the Hobgoblin identity was a secret for a long while before being revealed, though this whole arc was kind of convoluted. In the first game, the Hulk was DLC, and here he's playable from the jump. I love the Hulk, he's one of my mains in Ultimate Alliance 3, but we just didn't vibe with him the way we vibed with the other strongman character, the Thing, in this game, so he was benched. Red Hulk is a skin that you can play as in the game. In the comics, he's Thunderbolt Ross, General Ross, or Thaddeus Ross, whatever you want to call him. Ross first appeared in Incredible Hulk 1 from 1962, though it wouldn't be till 2008's Incredible Hulk 1 Volume 2 that he became the fierce Red Hulk. Human Torch was a flying projectile character, and despite filling a similar niche on our team to Iron Man, but proved to be too valuable during the game's main story not to have as one of our mains. He, much like Iron Man, can shoot fast projectiles, and the two characters can combine their might with an overpowered laser combination attack Aiden and I affectionately called the Meat Grinder, which just fucked up anything it touched and was severely overpowered and lasted way too long. Iceman returns from X-Men Legends in the previous Ultimate Alliance games, and again is a beam-based freeze character, but we never found him particularly useful, and he never made it to our team for a very long stretch. Invisible Woman returns in this game and can shoot beams and make shields. She pretty much sucked again. Iron Fist was an anti-registration exclusive character, so we were locked out of him for much of the game, working with his partner Luke Cage on Captain America's side. Iron Fist was a brawler we didn't find much use for, though. He originated in Marvel Premiere 15 from 1974 and was one of Marvel's martial arts characters from the era. He would eventually be paired with Luke Cage as the heroic duo, the Heroes for Hire, and eventually work here and there on the street level with people like Daredevil. B. Bang Wen was an alt costume for Iron Fist and was the Iron Fist of the 1800s who fought the West for China back then, first appearing in the Immortal Iron Fist 3 from 2007. Cool additional costume, I guess, but I never ran Iron Fist substantially, so I never even tried the costume. Iron Man is a pro-registration hero, clad in his then-modern Extremis armor. He is exclusive to the Iron Man side of the campaign naturally, which is why we went that path, since Iron Man and Human Torch's Meat Grinder finisher kept a similar duo of characters on our squad for most of the game. At one point, you can't play as him, but anytime he was playable, we had him on the team. Juggernaut is a strongman character that returns from X-Men Legends 2, and we never chose him as a strongman choice, but he's a cool inclusion if you wanted to run an X-Men squad. Luke Cage is playable in this game again, and with his healing factor, we knew we had to play him on our team. Though, an issue arose when we had to pick a side and Luke was anti-registration. This meant we had to pick between him and Iron Man, since we foolishly really didn't pay attention when assembling our initial team. He was a solid strongman with a healing factor, but man, if you don't want to lose anybody, keep in mind who is on whose side from the jump, otherwise you'll have to sub some people out, which is why we took the Thing in his stead. Jean Grey is back on the roster from X-Men Legends, following her exclusion from the first Ultimate Alliance, and is an energy character, but again is too much of a glass cannon and conceptually overcomplicated for a fairly easy beat-em-up game, so we left her on the bench. Magneto returns from the previous game and is another energy projection flyer. We ended up passing on him, we didn't really need to fill this niche again. Mr. Fantastic is another returning character, though he's only playable in the Iron Man side of the campaign when the paths converge, so keep that in mind. Honestly, with him being a physical range character, again, he just seemed a bit too odd and gimmicky to bother with for any extended period, sort of like Jean Grey. He wasn't as terrible as he was in the first Ultimate Alliance game, though, from my experience with him. Miss Marvel returns here, the original Carol Danvers version. She is, again, a flyer with lasers. We did try her out a bit when Iron Man was briefly unavailable. She was solid, but again, once Iron Man was back, we dumped her back onto the backup roster. She was able to do the meat grinder combo with the Human Torch, so that's the gist of why we put her on as a temp. Otherwise, she was just a worse version of Iron Man in our opinion. Nick Fury returns here. He's a gun character like Deadpool, but less versatile and less physical. We didn't run him. In real life, a speedball is a typical mixture of heroin and cocaine, but in the Marvel Universe, he's a character that premiered in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 22 from 1988, and after the deaths that happened as a result of his team, the New Warriors, he went underground and became Penance to try to live down his guilt on the event. He's a playable character in this game as Penance, and while I thought he was cool as a kid and played him on the Wii version, we got him so late in the game, we never really played him that much during this playthrough. He's an edgy gimmick character, but I suppose that's what's interesting about the guy, so I liked him back in the day when I was an edgy 11-year-old. Psylocke in this game is an energy brawler, which is slightly unique. She returns from X-Men Legends, and it's nice seeing her on the roster, but we didn't play her very much. Songbird is a Pro Registration exclusive hero that originated in Marvel 2-in-1, number 54 from 1977. She can do energy projection and fly like Iron Man, but we didn't run her as that niche was more or less filled in this game. If you end up running her, always pick Pro Registration, as she's one of the exclusives. Spider-Man is back here, and we didn't love him. I think much like the first game, Spider-Man isn't all that exciting to play in these games. Not super strong, not super dynamic, and his powers come off more gimmicky in a game of this style than, say, Marvel's Spider-Man, which is designed around his fighting style. Storm was tremendously overpowered in X-Men Legends 2, but not so much here. Flying, energy projection, meh, pass. The Thing is here, and is one that we ended up maining. He became our strongman after we lost Luke Cage, who did have a healing factor over the Thing's base form, but healing factor is eventually given to everybody, depending on what perks you attach as the game goes on, so he ended up being a pretty solid replacement for Luke Cage. Thor is here. He was actually dead in the comics during this point in Civil War, but that isn't really super important. He's a bit of a physical projectile hybrid, as you may imagine. Not sure why we skipped him, we just didn't really want to use him, I guess. Venom has both Matt Gargan, the current Venom at the time, and Venom Eddie Brock suits. He's okay, more of a strongman with some gimmicky attacks, but he was fine. He's one of the unlockables after the nanite brainwashing thing wears off, so we didn't bother playing with him that much. Finally, we have Wolverine, who has always been on our team since the first X-Men Legends, because he's continually overpowered, though unlike X-Men Legends in the first game, he wasn't actually that great, just an okay base physical character. I liked him, but honestly, this is probably the least essential of our final team that also included the Thing, Human Torch, and Iron Man. But we figured we might as well run him since we had a 4th spot open and have used him in all the other games, and knowing full well that he was super overpowered in Ultimate Alliance 3 from my experience. The gameplay concepts in this game are more or less similar to what we saw in the previous 3 games in this pseudo-franchise. Go through levels that are mostly linear with standard beat-em-up punches, heavy attacks, and special moves. As you traverse the levels, you get health and energy drops. You can also attach various perk medals, and your stats slowly grow over time, both character to character and as a larger squad. Squad powers stay the same over time, character gets stats, and move changes depending what you choose to do. It is worth noting this game did dumb down the upgrading system a bit. In the past games we discussed, min-maxing was an option, but that isn't really a thing here. Upon level up, the game distributes your new stat increases across your levels and doesn't give you options like the previous games did. This leads to a more balanced character build, but has the disadvantage of robbing you of just dumping into specialties for the characters and maxing out their niche as we did previously. There's also metal perks, which are pretty simple attribute boosts and largely replace the gear upgrades with blanket squad boosts of your choosing. Suits no longer function different costume to costume as they did in the last game, and you really only get to buff moves as you see fit. Though even the moves, which you're allowed to customize optimize eventually hit level caps, making you have to spread your points across other moves, otherwise you just aren't using points. Super moves also have some issues, like the fact that there's numerous cutscenes constantly, and by the time you save up for one of these moves to use it, the gameplay will just randomly cut off to some sort of cutscene and cancel your move. It happened to us like 30% of the time we used super moves where the cutscenes just totally cock-blocked us from it, which was kind of annoying considering the moves take a while to save up for. All this to say, the strategy and RPG elements of the previous game is set back on baby mode, more or less, and it feels like a level grind where you kind of watch the cards fall as they fall rather than a straight strategy game with RPG elements as the early entries had been. Something that Team Ninja for the third entry of the series goes the total opposite direction on, making it even more complex than the first 3 games. Part of the fun for Aiden and I think, was playing out our teams and sort of figuring out how to buff the teams to be most effective. This hand-holding takes away much of that strategy for pretty basic upgrading your main powers for each hero when the game allows, and switching out your medals to stronger medals as the game allows. This game is stripped of a lot of the elements that made the first game kind of fun, and it's sort of a detriment to the gameplay for me, since originally these were like 50% strategy and 50% beat 'em up. Now you pretty much just drone through a beat 'em up, occasionally get a medal and change 1 or 2 attributes. It's a lot less involved on a stats standpoint, though I think this does allow for new and younger players to have an easier time entering the game. So this is probably the best place to start if your younger children or something want to try Ultimate Alliance. It's a lot easier for them to pick up and play. I think the middle ground would have been to have it default into auto spending and then allow you to customize if you so desired. Not too dissimilar of how the last game worked, where initially the game would just auto spend your points, but if you wanted to turn that off and customize yourself, that was allowed and fairly easy to do. I'll admit, as a kid, these mechanics were a bit much for me, and I didn't realize how essential they were in X-Men Legends, making it a bit hard for me, but now as an adult, it's kind of the best part, and shows level by level progression with a higher emphasis on choice that was stripped here. Can't help feel, in this department, we went a step back. This game, like the last, is a variable tour of the Marvel Universe, though with less varied locales than the last, less emphasis on cosmic magic and odd locations, more labs, and more labs from various factions within the Marvel Universe. Though huge amounts of bosses, both heroes and villains from across the Marvel Universe, show up, which at least adds some variety. You got A-Bomb, Bullseye, Colossus, Electro, Havoc, Molten Man, She-Hulk, the Tinkerer, Titanium Man, Cable, Firestar, Multiple Man, and more from all over the Marvel Universe that can be fought, but at the same time, I just can't help but wish locales were more varied, as sometimes running from generic building to generic building gets a bit old. Where's the Sanctum Sanctorium? Where's Asgard? Where's Doom's Castle? A lot of these fun locations are just kind of absent here. Like previous games, along with generic NPC enemies, including guns, heavies, and giants, you have tons of bosses intermittent throughout. Assuming you play and scavenge as you go for coins, health, and energy, put even the minimal thought into your team, I would be shocked if you have any problems beating these enemies. This game's enemies aren't a crazy upgrade from the original, but I will say the combat is fun as ever, despite the dumbed down RPG mechanics and the occasional super move cancel, which gets pretty annoying. And you'll still find the same old satisfaction beating down a horde of enemies as you did in the previous games. Bosses like Goliath in the pro registration side were also kind of fun gimmick bosses. I don't have too much to add over previous entries, but I think if one thing stayed consistent in this entry, it was that the beat 'em up mechanics are still pretty fun, and it's always fun just going around beating up numerous enemies with your squad you've assembled. Graphically, this game is pretty high quality with clear silhouettes, though I will say it's a bit more Xbox 360 gray than the previous games. They also went with a refined, realistic style to kind of make you feel the grit more, and while I think the game looks good, the color palette is so low saturation that despite solid models and such, it just feels a bit too drab at points. I wish they upped the color in this colorful superhero game. The camera angle also leaves some to be desired, closing in tighter on the heroes and being more behind them. Not a huge deal, but it does make this game, which can sometimes get a bit clustered, even harder to follow. Other annoying quirks in this game include the fact that they cut the minimap, Why, you may ask, when that made navigating this dungeon crawler way easier? I have no idea, but it was annoying and seemed to make missing collectibles like the gamma parts needed to unlock Hulk or other collectibles much easier to miss. And while the supers are very busted, as I said, the aforementioned meat grinder, them being constantly cancelled by annoying and overbearing cutscenes with little indication when they're dropping you back into the fight, is a constant annoyance. This game also brings back challenge mode, but again, it's really easy and cuts much of the challenge and forced character variety that made it fun originally, opting to make them just something you can blow through in under an hour with whatever squad you want to use. If you had a good team to beat the main game, you'll blow through these pretty easily without having to change it up very much. And ultimately, while I think Civil War is an okay idea, I only get so much mileage out of heroes punching each other, and making that the central focus kind of forces them to make everything bases, bunkers, and laboratories as the main battlefields. I think we miss out on a lot of great boss opportunities and great locations in the Marvel Universe that just don't fit into the concept of a bunch of heroes meeting up to duke it out. Overall, I think it's okay, leaning on kinda bad. The problem is a mixture of being easy, simplified, a bit janky, and it's just such a step down from previous entries that it's almost not really worth playing. This falls much more into the quick superhero shovelware category than the other games do, and while it has an impressive library of characters and occasional good combat sections, much of the game just gets repetitive and old, with the thing that kind of cut down that monotony, the RPG elements, being totally stripped down and the strategies taken out of what used to be a strategy RPG beat-em-up, which is ultimately what made the first couple games so special in this series. Ultimate Alliance 2 saw around 73% on its main ports on Metacritic, with the Wii, PS2, and DS version faring around the 50% range. Most people agreeing that this game had fun button mashing gameplay, but subpar cutscenes and poor presentation and voice acting, despite good graphics in the game. Some also noting it's too similar to the last couple games, though with the RPG elements stripped to its barest form. This game would also lead to the series, which to this point had 4 entries, to be put on ice for 10 years until 2019's Ultimate Alliance 3, which was a Switch exclusive game published by Japanese studio Nintendo by Japanese studio Team Ninja, a decided departure from the Activision published early entries. That game would be based more around the MCU with some comic elements sprinkled in, but I think that's a story for next time. Anyhow, Aiden and I started that, so I expect it sooner or later. Since I moved, I had less time to play games with Aiden, but we still play here and there, and so it'll happen eventually.
That's so douchey. That's so douchey.
No, let her cook. Let her cook.
That's douchey, bro. It's decided, bro. It's decided.
How does she look like that?
This is a douche, dude.
She looks like a Power Rangers villain.